welcome to our next podcast episode. And so on the top left podcast, we cover topics interesting to MSPs around the world: project management, service, help desk, dispatch, different things, mindset, leadership as well. Sometimes we get to nuts and bolts, sometimes high level. So bring on different clients, partners, speakers. And today I'm excited to have on Nathan, who's one of the executive coaches with PX8. So welcome, Nathan.
Thanks for having me. And for those who usually watch this, you're probably noticing my accent's a little bit different. So I'm from PX8 APAC down in New Zealand, working out of Christchurch.
Awesome. And yeah, we've had your colleague James on many times, James Davis. We've done 6 or 7 episodes on project management from start to finish, where they go off the rails, and which often starts with the beginning of the project.
Yeah.
Today I wanted to talk about the different approaches of managing projects and not to tell people what's right or wrong, but just explain it, and they can see what approach is best for their team.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds like a good strategy for today.
Yeah, definitely. It's a question I hear a lot of. What certification should I do? What project management methodology or framework should we use? And really, I think it's driven by the nature of your organization first and foremost, and the clients and how you're interacting and working with them. So, I've seen a lot in the MSP space where they try and apply Agile, practices and things like that. Often, that iterative approach for an ongoing product, or you're making continual changes like you would with top left and things like that. It works great, but often it's more of a transitionary short-term project. So, moving your server from being on a server to being on SharePoint. You're not building SharePoint. SharePoint's already built using commoditized products and things like that. So, I'm really keen to talk around what frameworks, what methodologies you can use, but also just maybe we could touch on how to assess the nature of your work and what's going to best suit you. What have you been observing?
There's a lot of approaches, and I think MSP gets figure what do we need, and then pick and choose the elements of the different frameworks to give them what they need. And just I see a breadth of the maturity in these organizations. I was just having a conversation in our Slack community with a client, and he's like, I'm the PM, but really I've been an accidental PM because 5 years ago there's nobody there, and I was like the senior tech, and now I'm in this PM position, but I got no training, no process, no mindset, no tools on it. So you appreciated the things we share. I think a lot. So you got at the bottom end the accidental PMs. They're really actually a coordinator, not even a PM.
Yeah. The organized engineer that ends up picking up.
They come from other industries like construction or something else. They've been doing large projects, $1 million projects with 10 resources over 2 years or whatever it is. And they've got, they feel crippled because this industry doesn't have the tools or the process, even with their PSA. And so they're trying to help these MSPs to establish these practices. So they're thinking traditional PM, waterfall, breaking down things, dependencies, and these things are hard in the common PSAs today. So everyone's in a different spot with their team. Sometimes a lot of these PMs, I see they're working PMs, like they have a PMO, like somebody's oversight of their portfolio, but they give a senior tech is self-managing their projects. They break it down, they do the work, they might delegate. So it's all over the place.
Yeah, it is all over the place. And it's something we talked about a little bit through courses or on instructively training is the different types of project management as well, and what's actually the most important aspects of project management. And what you're kind of alluding to there, I see a little bit of what we refer to as set and forget project management, where you give them a plan. It's up to you to go figure it out. Come and talk to me when it's finished. So spend a lot of that time up front planning, spending in that initial scheduling phase and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes things don't run to schedule, as we all know. Who's keeping things on track? Who's communicating with the clients, with the stakeholders? All really some of the most essential parts of being a project manager. Often the things that get left because there isn't that that mindset of ownership or governance or accountability across the projects that they are running.
Yeah. So I guess, how would you define like critical chain, critical path way of development? How do you characterize that?
Well, mapping out what dependencies you have mapping out what the actual outcome or important objective of the project is. What are the steps that are required to meet that as I wouldn't necessarily say a minimal viable product, but it's something that's working, that's going to achieve what the objective of the project is, and then outlining what the dependencies are. So often when I'm talking to people, I'll talk them through something kind of in the vicinity of critical chain as well. What are the dependencies, and I'll get them to add it into things like their assumption and their scope and things like that. Examples I have is like being involved in projects before where you're doing new site kit outs and things like that. Well, actually, we've got dependencies that are completely out of our control here. Like I can't put in, the server if I don't have power. I can't put desktops in if there's no power outlets to plug them into. There's no desks available. There's still people building in the site, things like that. So I think looking and breaking down your projects, whether or not you're using something like critical chain theory or something else, thinking around what things you're doing, what you need to achieve to get there, and then looking at all the steps to reach there, what could actually get in the way or stop those from happening. Obviously not to the extent of there's a breakdown on the motorway and I can't drive to site or things like that, but yeah.
Okay, so some of those dependencies may not be a ticket. It's not like you're depending on another ticket in your ConnectWise project, but just got to be aware of those limitations.
Yeah. Combining risk with what the outcomes or the outputs and actions are that you need to do. I think without, again, as we mentioned, we were talking about before, I'm not really an evangelist for any particular framework. I am one of those find what works and chuck it in, try it out, see what happens. If it doesn't work, look at why, collect lessons, learn from your lessons. But when it comes to that, I think having a risk-based approach across your project as well, and having that initial conversation, discussions, discovery, validation early on in the project, and continuing through, because you'll foresee a risk. Are you keeping an eye on that risk? Has that risk been foreseen? Were we able to move around it? Did we mitigate it? Again, valuable things to have so that it doesn't come to that go live date and that thing that we had a massive dependency on that wasn't in our project scope, wasn't something that we had to do, has put the project at risk. Could we have communicated that up front earlier? Could we have leveraged our clients' relationships with third parties or other providers that were involved, other things like that as well to keep things moving?
I think that applies whether there's an agile approach or a more traditional structured approach as well, I think. Yeah. So how would you store these risks? Like a Word document that goes into your project, or keep it in SharePoint? Like where do you document these risks that are identified?
I like to use Microsoft lists as much as possible. I like them over Excel and Word because you can end up with a central repository and what you're looking for. So often I'm talking to people, we'll start with a lessons log, capturing your lessons as you're going with your project, as opposed to at the end of the project, what went wrong? Well, that went wrong 6 months ago. I don't really remember what happened, and it's fine now because we finished the project. So we'll just forget about it, move on, make the same mistake again. Storing those in a SharePoint list or Microsoft list. Same with risks. So you could have a risk register in there. There's things like issue tracker, which are built out of the box with Microsoft list as well, just to update some of the fields. What client was it against? What was the project? What's the risk? What was the risk approach? Was it that we were going to accept, mitigate, transfer, other things like that? Have a record of those risks, because as well, you can also learn from those risks from one project to another. Like a risk could be migrating your emails out of an on-prem Exchange server and they've got really slow internet. That's a risk. That's a risk that you could foresee or check every time you run an Exchange migration to 365. As an example, just determine, is the uplink going to be good enough?
Yeah.
What about you?
So I was just going to say, the thought I had is I did the PMI ACP, which is the Project Management Institute Agile Certified Practitioner. And that's one of the key things is with Agile, Kanban, Scrum is identifying the risk and do the stuff that's the most risky up front. Don't leave it for the end of your project. And then anything that's high uncertainty, we're not sure, there's unknowns, risks, that goes top of your backlog. You do that first. It's not about scheduling first, but it's just at the top of the list, and you go through the most difficult things first. And you make the easy, tedious, or easy admin stuff for the end.
It's interesting how often we don't think about risk though with a project in the project management space. So like a lot of the people I'm working through coaching, I'll talk to them about these things. We'll be talking through, hey, talk me through your project, how it's going, what's coming up, what's potentially going to risk you delivering this on time, and they'll raise a whole bunch of things. And I'm like, is that a risk that you've communicated to the client? Is it a risk that you communicated to your manager, to the rest of the project team? And often it's not. It's just, it's the back of my mind. I'll see what I can do to figure it out. Not going to leverage the team expertise, not going to keep the stakeholders engaged or involved or advise them as well. And I think it's just because when you are, like you said, a senior engineer moves into a project management role, just because they're the most organized or the most senior of the team or whatever it is, they often have still carried through that mindset of, I'm the last point of escalation for things, so it's up to me to figure it out, and I'll just figure it out in my own time, without considering the fact that the relationship now has changed where multiple people are actually depending on them for guidance and communication.
Yep. Tell me more about that. I'm trying to track with some of those things there. So how does that show up?
How does the risk show up, or how does the not just communicating
and such, and what you mentioned there with the technicians?
Sorry, could you rephrase?
Kind of a blind spot, I guess they have, and it's just not brought up. And it's,
you mean where they identify potential risks and they're not bringing them up? Yeah. So I find out about them through conversations, or also doing postmortems on projects. You planned on this thing being done, let's say today's the 7th of December in New Zealand. I want it done on the 8th of December, or I wanted it done on the 6th of December. 7th of December rolls around. Have we completed it? Why haven't we completed it? Because this thing went wrong, or this thing was missing. How long, just asking some questions. How long did you know that thing was a potential risk or was going to cause something to happen? Or sometimes we don't even understand the concept of risk or what it is. And if we don't understand it, how can we raise it or flag it? But again, lessons, looking through, why didn't we come across something, or why did we come across something but not do anything? Having some level of communication across projects and the project team is really a key thing there. Are we catching up? Are we even conversing around these things, the risks, not holding them to yourself, but making other people aware? And it's not a case of things going off track. You're not doing your job as a project manager, or you're failing as a project manager when things go off track, because things will go off track. When you're talking about critical path, do we have some fluidity in the timeframes? There's some things that'll be definitive, but there'll be things where I want it done between Monday and Friday. We can kind of shift and work it around. Are those things also being covered off?
Yep.
And are we keeping an eye on the track? Keeping an eye on whether we're on track. Are we going to achieve these things by Friday? I think that's where things like using Kanban can really help, to have that visibility across the team as well, because making that visible is one of the first things that we can really do to help reduce the risk of someone holding things to themselves as well, by making that visible.
Yep. Yeah, what's coming to mind for me is that in a project template, there should be one of an early ticket is, you got your kickoff tickets, your 0-day kind of tasks.
Yeah, sure.
You have one, okay, we're going to identify, have a meeting, talk about the risks, and the output of that is create tickets that go into the project to investigate further. Like, okay, here's the issues we know are good, and then here's 5 things that we have to look at the power in the server room. Like, can it actually take more servers, for example? We'll make a ticket backlog of that project, and perhaps schedule it right there, an on-site visit, or add it, bundle it with the other ticket for the initial on-site visit, but not let it languish in the backlog for weeks down the road, but it's got to be pretty high. And that's just random, right?
Sure.
Put towards the top of that ready column, so that it's going to get pulled pretty quick from that backlog.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we misunderstood each other a little bit there. So when having those initial discussions, like even in the scoping phase, this should be something that you're considering is what are the things that we're going to do and what are the dependencies or things that are going to cause us issues. That's why I'm a big fan of having things in things like Microsoft Lists, because you can filter it and see what type of projects have we done that were like this, where things have gone wrong in the past. What can I learn from it? Is it likely to happen in this one as well? Because now you can also put those things in your scope with your exceptions or out of scope. You know, these things are out of scope. If you don't have power outlets, that's something you need to provide for us in advance, and we're going to check and let you know. But us, you know, the impact that that's going to have on the timeframes, on the commercials and things, it's not for us as our responsibility. It's something we're putting back to you to manage, as an example. But yeah, have those conversations in the early kickoff project, review what the foreseen risks were with the scoping, has anything new come to mind, and communicate those with the client as well so that they're aware. Because again, it's better to know something's going to go bad than it is to have something go bad and not being told.
Oh yes, people always, early notice and repeat it. No surprises. It's got to be the basic rule. I think about these things from a perspective of, like, I've never been a full-time project manager. That's not my role now. It's more around flow design and the best practices and such.
Sure.
Right? I had the experience of being the accidental project manager years ago, and we were doing badly and losing clients and losing our hair. It was bad. Almost went bankrupt through it, and that's kind of started this journey for me. Is there's got to be a better way. Even though we had a PSA, we're doing the time entry, all those things, and dispatch, but the scope management wasn't there. The dependencies, the risk, so many things were off track. But visualizing and seeing the chaos definitely helped. So I view that as step one. It's not perhaps improving our statement of work effort, like that always be done too. But first step is seeing the flow and the impact, and that drives our decision making. If we see it the right way, then people's brains just fire off the right way. And like, oh yeah, we need to do this. We need this SOP, this checklist.
Yeah, it's What do you think from your perspective, having turned it around and then started a business around visualization of projects and service? What to you are like the 3 or 4 key breakthroughs that you found you had when you started visualizing work, or what did you need to do to get there? Because just making the work visible and seeing things going off track is one part, but how you deal with it is the next step to come through. And there's a level of curiosity or even courage to actually face that you're not doing something very well, without worrying about getting the stick versus the carrot and other things like that. So have you got any suggestions there for going through that experience yourself?
Yeah, it's what I learned, and it's still, I'm seeing that now again. But because we didn't know what our workload was, we couldn't say no. And it's like, or ironic, I'm getting it now. Like, I preach this stuff to clients, and I realize, wow, I've got way too many marketing projects in progress, and they're inching along. So that's literally a conversation going on today. Is there's like 30 projects. I probably need to get it down to like 5 to 10, get them done, and get wins under a belt. And streamline that, because we're all frantically trying to do all these things and getting nowhere. And I think that's where most MSPs are at with their projects and service as well. Is that overall they have too many projects in play on deck, and then there's too many tickets as well. Like engineers with 5, 10, 20 tickets they've started and are not done. So once you see it, now you can start doing something about it. Like, hey, we need to freeze, not take on more. Let's get these things done. Let's say no, and let's get this stuff going out. It's like a pipeline, right? It's like it's bottlenecked. You let it flow out before we put more into the pipe.
I often refer to it like, that show Hoarders, where people, have a stack of newspapers from 1987 sitting in their, bedroom, and they can't get into their bed, and I'm going to read it one day, or I'm going to need it one day. I think we're a lot like that with our services and our project tickets. I see that a lot with just clutter of something. I look at things, I'm like, why is that 120 days old? It's just a straightforward answer. And they're like, oh, well, we don't want to rock the boat or push the client or tell them an answer that they don't want to hear. And it's like, well, you're not telling them anything is telling them the answer that they don't want to hear. You're just not saying it. They have to come to that conclusion themselves. But the point you made about the understanding the capacity, I think that is one of the most critical things that a lot of MSPs aren't planning for. Is we'll get excited about a new product or a service that we're offering. Account managers, sales will go out and sell it like crazy to everyone. They'll make the promise that we can start it next week to everybody. And before you know it, you've got, your 80, 90% utilized team all of a sudden has to deliver another 50% of capacity in a week. And the flow and effect to that being that the work that they were planning to do now isn't going to get done. The new work that they've added isn't going to get done. And it's just going to carry on. And in the next week, we've added a whole bunch of new projects. So, we need to stagger that work out a lot better.
Yeah. And that's what one of my favorite books is, The Phoenix Project, which I got on my background here, right? That's one of my favorite books. It gets into that because they were trying to launch this software project, and it's taken 2 years, 3 years, because they're just all really constipated with all these projects going on. So it goes through their journey to implement lean, agile methods and high flow, going from one release every 9 months to like 10 a day with DevOps. And that's been very inspirational for us and a lot of our clients, a lot of MSPs, is it all, most of it directly applies to an MSP environment. But when they started visualizing it, they went into their boardroom, like they call it like a war room. It started mapping out everything, and like, wow, this is crazy. And then it clicked in everybody's heads, like all their engineers and developers, is like, okay, this is insane. We need to get this down. And it's not about the hours scheduled, it's just the number of things going on is the most important. That's just what I'm realizing more and more, is like, we don't need to estimate every ticket in the project, but we control that. We're just doing one thing at a time. Everything else takes care of itself.
How have you found because, particularly as I was saying before, we're quite commoditized with the projects we do in the MSP space. Like you're moving something that's already built to something that's already built. It's, there's not really much. Well, there's always going to be scope creep, changes, dates that aren't met, people get sick, someone goes away, clients hard to get a hold of, and things like that. But how do you get that accuracy to reflect in your scope and your estimates without estimating? Because you mentioned around not estimating everything, and I guess what you're coming from is not having a super detailed work breakdown structure of this part will take 4 hours, this part will take 6 hours. Right? It's more around focusing on doing one thing at a time, getting it done, moving on.
Yeah, because you look from an engineer perspective, that they should just be grabbing from that backlog. It's your traditional, your 3 columns, your to-do, your doing, and you're done. Grab that next one and work on it, done. And whether it's 3 hours or 4 hours, it doesn't matter to them. Because it's going to be the time it takes. These things should be estimated. Like the project manager should be thinking about these things and breaking it down. Like you do need a ticket you can pick up and do. Like it's got to have a defined done, like the done statement we always talk about.
Yeah, sure.
And ideally, be able to grab it, do it in one sitting, not have it linger around for days because you got to sit and wait or you need more information. The idea is to pick it up, do it, and done. Not throw it on the backlog or having to juggle like 4 in-progress tickets because you're waiting on something. Some of that, but yeah, definitely gotta have the statement of work when you're selling these things and the work breakdown structure. It's more about the list of things and not so much about the dependencies. Like the PM should be saying, hey, these things got to be done first. They're higher risk, or this has to be done in this order. So you still do your phases. But there's the stuff the PM is doing, and that's going to inform him to rank the tickets in your global backlog. So the tech just pull it in the right order. The tech shouldn't have to think too much about the project as a whole.
Sure.
Just grab, we say top left, like just grab that ticket in the top left and you're going to grab it and work on it. They shouldn't have
Task
to go look at
fulfillment.
the project plan or the portfolio. Like they're not the PM. They should just grab. There's like assembly line. Grab the
Yeah.
next ticket. Um,
Mm. I think that can work really well when you've got, quite an experienced, well-functioning team. But I've also seen the downside to this kind of gets pushed to an extreme, and I wouldn't say it's because of Agile. I'd say it's more because of convenience, and it gets pushed to the extreme where we just do, the top-down estimate of, it's 50 hours and we'll figure it out as we go. And it goes to engineers and they have to kind of rescope, refactor every time they have a piece of work. Like, oh, I've got this piece of work. I don't really know what's involved. I don't really know how long it's going to take, but I've got to go and figure it out. And I've seen that also drive inefficiency as well. So I think there's a balanced approach here with around that level of flexibility and what it is. Because estimates are estimates. They're not always going to be right. Just like, weather forecasts aren't always right. You think it's going to rain tomorrow. It doesn't rain tomorrow. Okay, well, you call up the weather person and be like, you got it completely wrong. You don't know what you're doing. No, you understand that situations change, things change. We can't predict a certain amount. But having some level of baseline or idea of how long something's going to take, I think is still something that's useful to have. I think when it comes to projects, sometimes people break down the tickets too much. So you end up with too many tickets, and then it's like I've seen projects where it's half an hour unbox server, half an hour put server on, put server and rack, plug in power, and things like that. Like they can all be tasks, little checklist items, and things like that. Focus on what's like a usable output that you can get that's going to work towards the outcome, and that can be your project ticket as an example. But with the level I see often organizations are working at, and what's coming through is there's no detail of what they're delivering. They don't have an idea of what the estimate is. They don't really have clarity on what they need to do, and then they need to go and revalidate every time they have something. So more of a warning, if you're looking at doing this stuff, don't go fully down the blasé or laissez-faire, whatever happens approach. There should still be some structure around it, but also do account for flexibility. Things will go wrong, things won't go to plan, things will go off track. It's just the nature of life and how things work. But if you've got that baseline to compare to, at least you've got an idea of what normal or what expected looked like to see if there's a deviation, because estimates on project tickets as an example, or budgets on project tickets, you want to know if someone's taking 20 hours to do something that should take 4 hours before the end of the project. So, use workflows and things like that to notify for that type of stuff. And it doesn't mean that they've done a bad job. It just means maybe there's an unforeseen risk or circumstance that's caused it.
Yeah. So, we're definitely all 100% behind need to estimate and budget. But when it comes down to doing the work, is some of the advice that people are really going is like, they have a dispatcher on the project work to schedule into people's calendars, which to us really seems like a waste. Abusing your calendar as a prioritization method, because things do take longer and shorter. So maybe somebody can do 3 things tomorrow, maybe it's 4, maybe it's 2. But what do you do when they're done early? What do you do with that extra half hour? What are they going to do? Or what do you do with the hour, and then you got to bump everything for the next week? It's like Tetris. So we don't want people playing Tetris with the calendars. It's just a waste.
I have seen it go very badly. There's 2 very extreme points of view around the scheduling side as well. I found. I think when we're talking about like critical path, things on the critical path, let's try to schedule them in, because they could be non-negotiables. They're things that we have to do. So if I need to do this today, and if I don't do this today, the entire project's at jeopardy, then I should do it, and it should take precedence or priority over pretty much anything else, unless an actual emergency happens. But you're right, because often it is Tetris. Things take longer, things take shorter. I think one of the biggest mistakes, again, going back to that capacity, is that we assume that everyone can work 8 hours on just project fulfillment in a day. And then when we're stacking up the calendar, it is a case of, 9 o'clock come in, 5 o'clock tick out, and all that time except for your lunch break, you're going to be working on these projects. It just isn't the nature. People eat food, they talk, they go to the bathroom, they breathe air, they do things that take time or take their attention away. And I think again, it's understanding and having that flexibility when it comes to things like schedules, and it comes to things like estimates and stuff. They're there, they're indicators, they're things that we should work towards if we can. But as we're saying, there's going to be things that drop out or change, and we need to have that flexibility. So in that case, should we focus on due dates as opposed to focusing purely on schedule, and can we get that done before the due date so that we've got targets and things to meet as well?
Yeah. So what's coming to mind for me is that if you're kicking off a project, maybe it's sitting in the backlog, not ready to start, is not worrying too much about due dates on the tickets, but as soon as it's actually starting, it's released to work, hey, we have capacity to work on this project, then some of those key tickets, those on the critical path, like dealing with these risks, certain key points, is putting due dates on them, so that on their Kanban board, they will visualize if it's getting close to being breached or violated, if it needs attention. That way it can go to higher on their rank and that sort of thing. People pull it without actually having to schedule it. So just some simple approaches without having to put due dates on every single ticket, because that's the other extreme, and then it's impossible to manage and keep everything up to date. But just those key things, once it's actually in that 1 or 2 week window, let's say. But if it's a project starting in 3 months, like that's too early to put due dates on individual tickets, I would say.
Yeah, unless there's, for instance, like compliance or other reasons that the client has, like their software's going into life or they have a legal obligation to meet them, then those again are things that you would consider the critical path, because the project's going to be a failure from the client's perspective if we don't achieve those.
Yeah,
like I said, I think there's extremes you can go to either way. With fully regimented, everything's plotted out and it won't work. And I think if you're going, particularly in our space where it's commoditized, repeatable projects for the most part, completely, it'll just sort itself out. I also see those go really poorly. So I think there needs to be some level of structure, but you also need to be aware and have some level of visibility, flexibility, and also just communications, that really key part for anyone involved in projects, particularly the project manager.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of it is just keeping it simple. We, in this industry, like to get carried away with our tools and there's AI and all that, but I think visualize what's going on and then small improvements every day. And having everybody involved with that. It's not just the PM having a better view, but everyone being involved with these conversations. So how do we improve this flow, this handoff, whatever it might be?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's again, that's again where collecting those lessons throughout, and my recommendation, collect the lessons as you're going through the project, as opposed to at the end of the project. It can be a conversation point that you're bringing up at your project meetings as well. Here's what I learned, here's what went wrong, here's what we did, here's what we're doing, here's who it's assigned to, using things like issue tracker with Microsoft List. Again, you're learning from those experiences, because everything's to some extent a level of experimentation, trial and error. You might do it well, 20 times and do it poorly one time, and that last one time you've done it, it's what everyone's going to remember. But is that one time now going to become the recurring theme, or can you learn from it to stop that one time happening again?
Yeah. So in the past, we've had either like tickets in the project that's kind of like a final completion one to look at lessons learned. How do we update our processes? We're not closing the project until we've closed all those loops, updated SOPs, future meeting agendas, that sort of thing. And then just going through that in like a monthly meeting to review those and sign off, complete, done. So that closing the feedback loop.
Yeah, awesome. It's good you got something.
I'm a bit hands off with the projects. So we have 2 MSPs that still own and operate, but we got PMs, presidents taking care of those. I'm not on the day-to-day or week-to-week on projects anymore, which is great.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, I guess anything else to share around MSPs, trying to level up and considering approaches? Any other wisdom you want to share?
I think the first thing is look at what you're doing now and actually write it down and map it out so you have a process, because there'll be multiple things throughout your organization where lots of different people work in their own separate ways. Sometimes that's fine, but there should be an overarching structure for how projects are done. Have a look at that. Having that visibility of what the process is it going to help you determine where you have inefficiencies or problems across that as you're working through it as well, because you can go through those steps and see what went wrong. You can also map that to your lessons. Start collecting lessons, see what's working for you, what's not working for you as well. You know, a lot of what we're talking about now, it's based off our experience or what we've seen. To an extent, I would say that's conjecture when you're talking about, you know, organizations we don't know, like organizations that are listening in today. So you've got to try and find what works for you. And there's lots of information out there. Often the best way to find out and validate if it works is to try it out, collect what you found and improve from there. So I think just get started. Bear in mind, from my perspective at least, it's good to have some level of structure. It's also good to have some level of flexibility. So steer clear of absolutes. But have something to work with and get started on it and see how you're going.
Yeah. And then I guess for our clients that are project managers or any service as well, is how do you and your team help them? Like, what offerings do you have to help with that? You mentioned you got your own academy and different resources.
Yeah, so we have academy coaching where we work one-on-one, weekly accountability, helping implement processes, ways of working within your organization. We check in how things are going, track how profit and loss are looking, how projects are they meeting deadlines, is your team engaged and working well. We provide instructor-led training where we introduce you to project management concepts like PMI, again, introducing things like work breakdown structure as well, working through pre-sales training, which we also do with coaching. And then for our region, we'll also be launching group coaching in the new year. And if you're in America, that's already something that's available to you as well. And they have specific project manager groups that go through that peer group coaching.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I definitely learned a lot because you've got a lot more training, experience, certifications in this area than I do, and you're working with clients hands-on every week. So it's my pleasure to have you here and noodle some of these things, the different approaches and how to adapt them. And so we can create, project engines should be profitable. Some MSPs look at project as a loss leader just to get the recurring revenue. And
yes. Right? I could talk to you about that in another session, if you like. It's a conversation I'm having a lot of as well.
Yeah.
Don't do
profitable projects, and the client can be happy and get referrals, even though they're paying the money and the team is happy. So it can be a win all the time.
It can be, absolutely.
Good. Okay, well, we could go on again, and we'll probably do another episode at some point. So I will leave it there. So thank you, everyone, for listening on this one, and thank you, Nathan.
Thanks for having me.